Hi, good afternoon, Dan. Appreciate you once again taking a bit of time to come and have a chat.
No trouble. Good time to have a chat.
Yeah, always a good time after a winner. Always. Just to quite set the scene, what we'll try and achieve today is, obviously phenomenal performance again by Arishka, and and very pleased with the result from the handicapper, which has opened up a few other options that we thought we may not have had, with her being rated 72, as that allows her to run in a 0 to 70 still.
Yeah, no. So just to explain to people, races are capped normally on £5 rating bands. So we have 0 to 75, 0 to 70s, etc., etc. But what can happen is a horse that's rated £2 over the top. So in this case, we're 72. We can enter into a 0 to 70. We'd have the last preference to get in. So if 20 horses wanted to run and there were only 16 slots, we would be the last ones to get in. But it just allows the opportunity to enter. And if the field doesn't fill, then obviously we have the opportunity to run. You carry plenty of weight in that scenario. But, we were £2 below top weight on Saturday. If we were £2 above top weight, I don't think it would make a great deal of difference. I think, I've said it before, I think weight makes a difference when you're talking about, £10 and we're running over more of a distance. But I think, in a sprint handicap, £3 or £4 is the least of the challenges posed to a horse. A bad break or getting chopped up or something like that is far more detrimental to a horse's chances. So effectively, it means we can run in the same grade as we won in on Saturday, which would have to be encouraging. Or alternatively, we can look up to slightly higher grades going forward. So it's allowed us probably to look at 2 or 3 races that wouldn't have been on the programme had we been rated 73, which is helpful.
Yeah, so you sent me across a list today of possible races for Arishka pretty much throughout the whole of the month of May. Obviously, not all of them will be taken up, and some have a domino effect that if you go to A, you can't run in D, etc. And what I'll do after is I will send an email out later on today, including this video. So obviously they will all the people watching the video will have already read the email. And I will include in there some of those races. But I think looking at them in real terms, the first one is going to be a set of 3 possible options, which are Newcastle, Beverley, and Windsor, all pretty much in the first week of May.
Yeah, so we've got Newcastle, and that's a 56 to 75, which is, that's fine. We rated 72, so we'll be one of the better horses in the race. Potentially you could get a horse rated up to 77 in there. The appeal is, of course, we won there nicely. We've been to the track twice. We've run very well both times. Clearly, Arishka has no problem with the travel, and she thrives at the track. So that's a sort of very straightforward course and distance winner. And it looks the obvious choice. It's 13 days, so it's on the 3rd of it's 13 days since she won on Saturday, which is, it's close enough. The way she's come out of the race, she actually seems to have taken this race a little bit better than she did the first race, her first win, and that's probably related to the travel more than the actual race itself, if that makes sense. It's obviously a lot longer trip from Newcastle than back from Nottingham, so that's probably all down to that. But we rode her out again this morning, and she was fresh and well. So look, it's one of those things we would see when we come to declare. So we enter 6 days out and we declare 2 days out. So we'll be entering that race on Saturday. We'll definitely give her an entry unless there's something to suggest we shouldn't. But we wouldn't really be looking to make a decision whether we ran until sort of next Tuesday, Wednesday, once we've really seen how she is and how she's coming forward. So that's a very obvious race. And then on the 6th of May, sort of 3 days later, there's a couple of options at Beverley and Windsor, both 0 to 70s. So first question is, will we get in them? We'll have to look and see when the entries come out. And obviously there's a consideration as to ground. We ran well at Windsor last year on debut. No real reason why we wouldn't run well there again. Beverley, it's a very stiff 5. But I think, as we've run well enough over 6, and certainly the suggestion's been, particularly at Nottingham on Saturday, that a stiff 5 would suit. She was almost looking for a little bit further on at Nottingham on Saturday than the sharp nature of the track there. So, those tracks be fairly happy with. Beverley can be a little bit draw dependent. So, whether you would declare there with a big field and not being fairly confident you were the best horse in the race, I wouldn't be so sure. But, that's why we'd enter all 3, because actually we don't have to declare at Newcastle before we've had a chance to look at the fields at Beverley and Windsor and make some kind of assessment as to which race is going to be the easiest to win. And that's really what we're aiming for. I mean, obviously we're aiming to win again and get a hat-trick up. It's not the easiest thing in the world to get a horse to win a hat-trick, because the handicapper keeps having his say. So that's really the idea, and it would just be looking at the options, and of course having to take into the account the weather and on the ground and all that things. And if we've got choice, we've got choice, and it might just be that one race looks a bit easier or a bit more obvious than the others. So that's really the thinking behind entering all 3, and hopefully we can pick the right one and win it, really.
Can I ask a couple of questions about those? Because I think there's a couple of elements that some of the owners will know better than others and may not understand some of the intricacies. But when you're saying that we may not get in at Beverley or Windsor, that is because although you're allowed to enter at 72, even though it's a 0 to 70, horses that are rated 71 and 72 are the first to be omitted from that run. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. So every race, the horses get given ballot marks. If there's 10 slots in a field, or field sizes vary from track to track for safety reasons. If there's 10 slots in a field and there's 15 declare to run, the ballots, the lowest ballot marks come out first. So the horses rated 70 get first call, then the 69 and as it goes down the list. And once that list finished, they go back up to the top, and the 71s get in ahead of the 72s. And that's just to try and keep the races evenly matched between different abilities of horses possible.
I think the system, from at least from the exposure we've had to it, I think the system works well. It's we've had a number of times where Born to Finish has been rated 81, 76, and we've got them in the 0 to 75, etc. I mean, I could be for those geeks of owners that are out there. I'm possibly got the actual rating and scenario slightly out, but I do know there's been times where he's run off top weight, been rated a pound above the field. But what it does mean is you just don't have that certainty until the day of declarations of whether or not you're going to get into the race. Whereas when a horse is rated 75 in a 0 to 75, you can be pretty sure that if you want to run, you're going to get a run.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I would say is on this occasion, we've got effectively two races where the top rating is 70 on the same day over the same trip. Now, one's in the north and one's in the south, and that's for a reason. And the idea would be that the northern horses would run in the north and the southern horses would run in the south, but that's not really what happens in practice. But the nature of that actually means you've got the same pool of horses, and to a degree there'll be horses entered in both. And although the fields might look like they might be big, it will probably separate out a little bit.
And there will be horses that will do exactly what we will do, and we'll enter all 3.
Yeah. And again, there will be some horses rated 71 and 72. But there were horses rated 71 and 72 that were entered in Arishka's race on Saturday. None of them declared, as it turned out. But they would have got a run had they declared. They didn't declare for other reasons, I presume. But that was basically, there were 10 runners, and there could have been 16 at Nottingham. The field size at Windsor is quite big. I wouldn't be sure off the top of my head what it is at Beverley. But, I think, I'd be reasonably confident of getting a run wherever we went. But look, let's just let's see the entries and take a look and make a decision there.
And just one more minor thing. You mentioned there that Arishka's come out. There's 2 things really. Arishka's come out of the last race that little bit better, and that could be down to the fact she's like a little bit more experience and taking a race a little bit better. And I tend to agree from my limited experience that you're probably right. It's the less travel. So is the fact that the race on the 3rd, with that being at Newcastle, and that involving that little bit more travel to the race, never mind so much coming back, but to the race, does that in effect take a day away from our opportunity to be ready for the race? Whereas if it was at Windsor or at Newbury, she would be more likely to go. Is that a factor, or is that?
Really. I mean, I think we've got, particularly going to Newcastle, we've got a pretty good track record up there. We've got a very high strike rate, and we have a system of travelling a horse up there, and we know how to prep one in to it. And the work isn't done the last 2 or 3 days before a race. The work is done, a week out, 10 days. I mean, in this case, we wouldn't be doing a huge amount of work because we only just ran the other day, and we've got our recovery process, and then we're kind of almost ready to start tapering down into the next race. So, she'll only probably do, she'll do a couple of gentle days training now, and then she'll do a few harder days, and then she'll be back into easy training just to set her up for the race. So, in terms of setting her up, it's fine. It's just, if you're going to go to Newcastle, you probably don't train quite as hard the day before as if you were going to go, because we would leave the day before.
The process obviously worked for that twice before, so there's no reason to think it wouldn't work again.
So basically, we would, that race is on Friday. So on Wednesday, we would probably do lighter training on the Wednesday than if we were running at, say, Newbury on the Friday, which is just down the road. We would probably do a little bit more on the Wednesday in preparation, and obviously we do a bit of light training on Thursday morning. Whereas if we're going to Newcastle, she'll basically go for a session on the walker and go on the horse box, because we want her refreshed and we don't want the journey taking too much out of her. So that's the sort of difference. It's really, it's the last 2 or 3 days. You probably just do a bit less than you would if you were running locally, and that's just, you want to keep the horse fresh and well, and you're really training at that stage just to keep their mind sensible. And
it could become an exceptionally hectic 24 hours for crowd racing, because even in our little tiny bubble, we could end up with 3 runners in 24 hours if she went to Newcastle on the 3rd. The other 2 runs yet to be confirmed, but we have 2 of the horses where the emails I've had this afternoon have both said that the race we're looking at is on the 2nd and the race we're looking at is on the 3rd, but all at different tracks, all in different parts of the country. So it could be, not that that'll have a bearing at all on whether Arishka goes to Newcastle or not, but it does make it for an interesting 24 hours, if nothing else. But once you look at those 3 runs, you have earmarked, and it seems to be there's the 7 runs, and there seem to be in 2 lumps of 3, with 1 just out there on its own in the middle, which I think is a kind of a last resort backup option, and that's a 0 to 75 at Bath.
Yeah, so the slight issue, well, it's not really an issue, but with Bath is, I think the track there is, rising, and I think it would suit her in terms of it. The issue with Bath is they don't have a watering system, and it can get very quick there. We've had some rain today, but we haven't had much rain for a while, and I know our turf gallops here are very fast right now, and Bath will be just as quick. So the issue with hanging on and waiting, and in some ways, timing-wise, that's a really nice spacing to that race on the 15th. But we wouldn't want to be holding on for a race at Bath and then find that the ground is firm and we're not going to run. And then that kind of then means we're waiting until the 22nd, which is at Ayr, which is a better race, class 4, which I think I've put it in there because it's there as an option on the 22nd. That would be sort of more a race we'd think about were we to win, say, on the 3rd, because we're then looking for a second run in the month. It probably wouldn't be a race we'd wait for and go straight to. On the 24th, there's a race at Goodwood, again a 0 to 70. And then on the 27th, a 0 to 75 at Redcar. And with those 2, the same sort of scenario would apply. You'd probably be entering both, looking at the 2 and taking your pick as to which one looked the best fit. Now, if we've run on the 3rd or the 6th, something will have happened. Hopefully we'll have won and we'll have gone up in the weights, which will definitely rule out Goodwood, and it might even rule out Redcar. that might not be the case. It's a horse race. We might get a bit of bad luck somewhere along the line, and we don't run so well, and we go down a pound or two, or we stay the same. In which case, those two races look nice as a second run towards the end of May, were we to run at the beginning of the month. Obviously, there's a couple of races at the beginning of June that would then fall into things, but I didn't want to overcomplicate the whole thing.
No, and I think this has been really, because I mean, it's always difficult to not overload the owners with information, because they're guaranteed now there will already be owners who will be penciling in Goodwood on the 24th of May in their calendar, and it'll be their local track, and they will now be very excited about the thought of being able to go and watch Arishka at Goodwood. So, you know, whereas there's a lot of times we'll have conversations like this, I wouldn't say off the record or behind the scenes in certain, because if anybody ever asks me the question, I'll always tell them what the thinking is. But this is an unusual scenario where we have actually put this many races down on paper and said, this is what we are looking at for the month of May. And therefore then to go and share that with the owners, because it can overcomplicate things. So to go to June would just be crazy at this stage. And we have talked a little bit about possible targets later on in the year, and even possible targets for over the winter and into next year, which there is so much can change. There is nothing really to be gained by giving too much detail out to that to owners within a syndicate.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, you can get very bogged down, but you know, the reality is your handicap. You know, you'll often see it in big races, and they'll ask the winning trainer, well, where are you going next? And he'll say, oh, well, I'll go to the Guineas. But those are kind of obvious, and there's not actually that many options. Whereas when you're talking about a handicapper, which is the level we're in at the moment, so much depends on your mark. You know, had we gone up £5, we wouldn't be looking at half of these races. And that's sort of, you know, actually we'd have only had 4 options looking at that list. So we
really wouldn't be trying to make sure she made Newcastle, so just to avoid the risk of Bath and avoid having to wait for it.
Or you know, had we got to Newcastle, we'd have, you know, should Newcastle not quite work out timing wise, we'd be going, right, okay, well, we're going to enter Bath, we're going to have a look at the field, and you know, we'll have to wait and see what the ground.
Pray for the ground.
So these things are always in flux, and you know, you have to have, as a trainer or a race planner or whatever, you've got to know what the options are down the line, because it would be very silly to run, you know, for example, we enter at Newcastle and there's suddenly a horse in there that's won its last 2 starts really comfortably, and we haven't got the option to go to Beverley and Windsor, and we're suddenly running against a horse that, you know, we look at and we think, well, actually that's a flying machine. We don't want to be running against that. You know, hopefully we'll enter at Newcastle and that's what people will be thinking about us. But it's the sort of, you know, you need to have options with a handicapper in particular, because you want to go where you can win, and that's sort of half the challenge. Sometimes it's very obvious, you know, in April when you sat down and you produced a list for Arishka, there really were only, you know, a couple of races you could run in realistically. Yeah. And we entered in both, and you know, we made the right decision in not running in the first. Well, certainly by the second, it was the right decision. So it's just a case of assessing it on a race by race basis, and just always thinking about where you go slightly longer term, but focus on the immediate short term. You know, and again, were we to run on the 3rd or 6th, obviously we know what the immediate potential options are for the following start, but it might just be on the 1st or 2nd of June. There's a perfect race somewhere that we'd be remiss not to actually then take as the target. So,
but I think with a fair wind and with everything falling in place around, you know, number of entries, ground, etc., it would be fair to say that the expectation is that she will be running at either Newcastle, Beverley or Windsor, and then again at either Goodwood or Redcar, with the 2 runs in May.
2 runs in May, but I think, you know, and probably I'm obviously not going to discount Beverley at this stage, but it's a slightly tricky track. It's not, you know, it can be quite draw dependent and stuff, and preference, other things being equal, unless Beverley looked particularly weaker, I think we'd be looking at Newcastle or Windsor. But again, sometimes sometimes the racing in the south is a bit more competitive than it is in the north. It's just got those bigger yards with sort of quite nice horses that they've taken their time with, and they're maybe just looking for, you know, Windsor or whatever. Whereas, so as I say, we'll have a look and see. But I suspect we'll end up at Newcastle or Windsor. That would be my gut feeling.
Yeah, and if it was Windsor, then Ayr's probably going to be too soon. So then you're probably looking at Redcar. Whereas if it was Newcastle, Ayr might be okay.
Ayr's one of those. It's on there. It's a 0 to 85. Now, you know, we've just won a 0 to 70, so we're talking about, you know, more than a stone better quality of race. It's, you know, it's quite a big jump up, and there probably are options at the beginning of June.
That's worth waiting for.
That are worth waiting for. Ayr's a very long way to go to take on pretty good horses, you know, when we're talking about that level. So it's probably a case of the race is there because, you know, should we go and bolt up and we end up rated 80 something, that's almost going to have to be where we go. But, you know, it's in there for the options. And as I say, it's a case of really we're looking at those first three. If they just happen to come a bit too soon, then we're probably looking at entry at Bath. If the ground's not right, then we're probably hanging on till realistically Goodwood or Redcar. But as I say, let's see what happens to the second half of next week, and when we come to actually making this final decision.
Yeah, we're under no immediate pressure to do anything as such. It's useful to have this out there. And just one final thing, just to put to you, Dan. And I kind of know the answer to this, but it'd be useful to hear the answer from you, because I've had 2 emails this morning. The horse that finished second to us, Hanukkah Toba, whatever, the Stuart Williams horse, is running again on Friday. I think it's Friday. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Friday. It's ended up to run again, and it's already run twice since it ran against us in Newcastle. Why would a horse like that be running virtually every week, yet we're putting these gaps in between Arishka's runs?
Well, I think the first thing you have to take into mind, Hanukkah Toba's a gelding, or is he a colt? Maybe I think he's gelded, isn't he? I have to check, but anyway, he's a male.
I thought it was a filly, so that's the first bit I've got wrong. Yeah.
Well, maybe I just need to check that. Shall I pull him up? Give me 2 seconds.
You'd see who can get there quickest, because I'm going to do exactly the same.
But every horse's makeup is slightly different, and you just want to be. That. I'm not good.
3-year-old filly.
Okay, I stand corrected. Well, she probably takes her racing very well. I would also point out that she's not been the most consistent of horses, and you know, I think with Arishka, we've learned that, you know, she doesn't particularly appreciate running back quickly. We're looking to a long-term, you know, racing career. Going on through the season and just developing her step by step, and you know, sometimes you can get results by running horses back quickly, and it works very well. But it really depends on the horse, and I just think Arishka, you know, she is a filly, and I find you only have to put a filly in a position where they're over their head once or twice, and you know, they're not feeling it, and they're not as enthusiastic about racing. And I think, you know, it's important that we don't do that to a horse, and just knowing her at home and how she responds to things, and you know, we'd rather just spread things out a bit. The other thing, obviously, for this Friday, you were already entered on Saturday, so we didn't make the entry because we were running and we were happy to run, and we'd have been running off £6 higher. So, whereas actually in our next start we'll only be running off £4 higher. So that's a downside to doing that sort of thing. She ran poorly at Newcastle, Hanukkah Toba. We beat her a long way. She ran a little bit better at Lingfield next time out. And I know Stuart felt on Saturday, he actually came over and congratulated himself after the race and said, you know, well done. I really thought mine would run well today. It's the first time I've had her exactly where I wanted her, and for a while.
She'd run a race in Newcastle before she got to the start, and she pulled like an absolute. She really was very, very free going to the start and was sweating up by all accounts, and just didn't seem to be enjoying the night in Newcastle whatsoever. But I mean, it's entirely up to them. The emails, there was no, I didn't see any sense of criticism of how we are campaigning Arishka in the slightest. I think it was more just a curiosity level of,
I mean,
you guys are in a we're not.
Back within 48 hours. We won on a Wednesday evening once at Kempton. It would have been nearly the last race at Kempton, and we won nearly the first race at Wolverhampton the following Friday. So it would have been less than 48 hours. It was probably closer to 36 with a horse before. But he was a hardy, tough horse. He was a gelding, and he had a real fiery attitude. But a week later, we tried to go for the hat trick at Salisbury, and he kind of boiled over in the paddock. And there's just a danger when you race a horse too often, and that you can send them that way. And you've got to look after the mind. So certainly with Arishka, I just feel it's best not to push her.
Yeah, you've been right with that so far. So there's no reason to be thinking that we need to change it. I just think it's. I do like to try and get answers for the owners when the questions come in, and sometimes I think they'll always take more credit in what you have to say than what I have to say. So, as it should be. Otherwise, I would be training the horses, and that would be an absolute disaster. No, listen, as always, really appreciate your time, and thank you again for the hard work yourself and Claire and all the team are putting in with Arishka. Very, very well deserved results. And I almost call them reserved results, but you know exactly what I mean. And we'll get you back on video again very soon.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone at Crowd Racing, and hope you all had a good evening on Saturday. Those that were there certainly seemed to, and hopefully everyone else did at home. So,
Superb, Dan. Thank you.
Right, cheers.